When I got out of VMI, I coached for a year. Then I went to the Army. Then I went and sold insurance.
Coached what? Football?
Football, yeah.
What did you play? What?
Defensive tackle.
Oh, okay.
And I now mentor 4 college basketball coaches.
Wow, that's huge.
And they're all Division I. 2 of them are probably 2 of the top 25.
Is that surreal for you? Like to be able to?
I mean, it's.
You played, and then you're.
But I played football. I didn't play basketball.
Okay.
And so I like basketball because there's only 15 kids. And so you get to know the kids. So like I went to see Virginia Tech last Wednesday night against VMI, and I mentored both coaches.
That's awesome.
And so even though I went to VMI and graduated from VMI, I went down and was in the locker room with Virginia Tech before the game and after the game.
Wow.
And, of course, then I talked to the VMI coach after the game because he's a very close friend of mine. But what I have found about selling is that selling is a lot like sports.
Why do you say that?
Because it's competitive. You're on a team. You collaborate with other people. You find out what your role is. You find out what you're good at and you're not good at. You have a coach.
Yep.
You know, your sales manager is your coach. Now, I always tell people, especially young people, when I talk to them about jobs, and I go to Northern Illinois University twice a year, every year to teach. I've done that for 14 years. And I pay my own way. I give the students my books, and I go up there and spend 4 hours with them. And I tell them, don't look for a job. Look for a boss.
Interesting. Why do you say that?
Because your boss can look. People get intoxicated by working for General Motors or Google, et cetera. But if you work for an idiot, you know you're going to be an idiot, and you're not going to grow. And I said, frankly, what you ought to figure out is what are the questions that you ask your boss in order to find out whether he or she is the boss that you want.
So you're interviewing them.
You damn right you are. If you want the right opportunity. Now me, I was an idiot.
Okay.
My roommate calls me and said, after I'd gotten rejected from graduate school at Northeast Louisiana University, which is a great school, but it ain't that hard to get into. And so I had not done.
You applied.
I applied, and I was going to be a quarterback coach. And then I thought my college coaching career would be I'd be the next Nick Saban. Of course, back then it was Bear Bryant, you know. And I turned out I couldn't even get in graduate school. In fact, they wrote me a letter and said, "We can't fathom how you got out of college. You had so many Fs that we count those Fs. At VMI, they didn't count them. If you replaced them with a C, you know." So anyway, make a long story short, I had to get a job. So my college roommate got me a job in pharmaceuticals, but I didn't think that was selling. I thought it was PR. But what happened to me is the first 3 bosses that I had, which was the first 14 years I was in the pharmaceutical business, were the best bosses in the history of the world. And so I tell people I won the boss lottery. I mean, I had nothing to do with it.
Wow.
I just happened to get a guy named Jim Crutchfield, and Jim didn't know whether I was an introvert or not. And I asked him one day, because one day I wound up running a company, and he was still a district manager.
Wow.
And I said to him one day, I said, "Jim, why did you hire me?" I said, "I would never have hired me. First place, I show up to the interview in a brown polyester suit. If somebody lights a match, we're going up in flames."
Yeah.
And I said, and secondly, you know, I hadn't done anything of any magnitude. He said, "Yeah, but you went to VMI." He said, "You were smart, you were easy to talk to, and you went to VMI. And if you went to VMI, then you can probably do anything."
Wow.
Now, this is one of the reasons why I have been a huge donor to VMI for the last 15 years, is because VMI credentialed me when I had no credentials.
They built you from scratch?
Well, just the fact that I went to VMI gave him
Oh,
the
I
reason to
understand.
hire me. So I had no credentials.
They have such a strong
My
brand.
resume looked like crap. But the fact that I'd gone to VMI was, for him, all of the evidence he needed that I would be successful.
Did you feel that evidence while you were there? Was there a different air, culture, I guess you could say, experience?
I mean, you know you're going through something that's unbelievably difficult, because VMI is the hardest college in America to go to.
Really?
Yes.
I'm completely ignorant to it.
It's military. It's like West Point. But it's academically, it's one of the top 50 colleges in the country, almost measured by anybody.
Wow.
It's one of the few places in the world you can get an engineering degree in 4 years. Now, I flunked out of the engineering curriculum twice, so I went up with a degree in English. And the only reason I took English is because they didn't have afternoon classes, so I could sleep in the afternoon before football practice.
What drove you to get there in the first place? Was it? It wasn't family.
Well,
or a mentor.
I grew up in Memphis, and our best friend was a retired rear admiral in the Navy.
Oh wow!
And so and he had a big, huge house and lots of money, and so I always said, I want to be like Admiral Phelan, and so I wanted to go to the Naval Academy. I got an appointment to the Naval Academy, but then when they told me how long I had to be in the Navy, I thought, okay, A, I can't swim, B, which I thought would be a knockout factor. But I mean, they wanted me to play football. And then I said, they wanted me to go to the prep school, then they wanted me to go to Naval Academy for 4 years, 6 years active duty, 4 years in the reserves. I said, I'll be 100 before I'm out. Yeah. Well, VMI was only 2 years active duty and 4 years in the reserves, and it was military, and I didn't have to go to a prep school. And so I'd never seen a mountain. So I went from Cocoa Beach High School in Florida, where I made first team All-State in football. And, my name's in the stadium because I'm the first person to ever make All-State in Cocoa Beach. But I was only 3 years old when I got there. And I go up there, and the place is gorgeous. And, it's a dance weekend.
Okay.
And there's beautiful women everywhere. So I asked the coach, on Sunday morning before I left, I said, hey, just out of curiosity, how often is it like this? He said, like what? I said, all these good-looking women around here every weekend. Now I get up there, and it's 3 weekends a year. But no, I knew I was going through something difficult. I knew I was building relationships that would last me a lifetime. VMI has the strongest, for my money, it's the strongest network in America. Wow. If you go to VMI, I got an email this morning from somebody saying, hey, this guy from the class of 90 wants to talk to you. I have no idea who he is or what he wants, but because he went to VM, I'm going to talk to him.
It's almost like see someone driving a Harley, they have that culture.
Yeah, exactly. And so, no, I didn't realize I didn't realize the value of the VMI education until I was running the drug company, which is like 17 years later. And my boss, the guy that hired me, told me the only reason he hired me is because I went to VMI. And then I go to a scholarship banquet, and this guy who went to VMI 2 years ahead of me, who's a very close friend of mine, owns a gigantic construction company that builds Walmarts and Targets. And he stands up and gives a talk, and he got hired for the same reason. So I'm sitting there saying, if two people tell you drunk, lay down. And so what I realized was that VMI gave me credentials when I didn't have credentials. And what's that worth? I mean, it's worth a lot. So my wife and I have donated an out-of-state scholarship, I think, now for 12 consecutive years. Wow. And you get to get close to the athletes, and then you develop relationships with them. And it's a lot of fun.
See it as a networking opportunity as well for the future? Did you look at it at that?
Never looked at it like that.
What would be would you give advice to someone that's in college now of how to go about doing that?
I give advice to college students all the time. I said, number one, you cannot take advantage of it. You can't take advantage of a network you're not in. I mean, that's a very simple concept. Yeah. And I tell VMI graduates, actually, this past year, the president of the university, we call him superintendent, who's a 4-star general. Wow. And when I say 4-star general, you know who General Mattis is?
I personally don't.
I know, but he was, he's the
highest level.
He's the head of the
how many stars does it go up to? I probably
4 stars.
So that's his.
But he used to work for General P. David Petraeus used to work for General P.
Like Pat.
Yes. So this guy is the real deal.
That's a conversation. And, wow.
So you just realize that it's a special place. And then he asked me to speak to all the juniors and seniors and get them to understand the value of the VMI network. So I got up and talked about my book and said, look, you can't take advantage of a network you're not in. So I tell all these kids, you have to build your network proactively. And I go back and, I'm a simple-minded person from Memphis. And I try and keep things simple. The 2 things that you need to be wildly successful. One is a network of people where what you do matters.
Okay.
And if you don't have that, you can be the greatest in the world at it, and who cares? If the greatest football player in America is in Mongolia, is he playing in the NFL?
No.
No.
So be in the environment.
You have to be not only in that environment, but you have to have relationships with people in that environment that have more street cred than you do that can vouch for what your
The edification.
Exactly. If you don't have that, you got nothing. The second thing is you better be great at what you do.
Competence.
Because if you suck at what you do and you got a great network, what do you have?
Bad reputation.
You got nothing, right? And if you don't have a network and you're great at what you do, what have you got? Nothing. You got to have both. Now, the data shows that if you proactively build your network and you build it broadly, most people build their networks narrowly.
What do you mean by explain that? Yeah.
Well, if I'm in the pharmaceutical business, I make my contacts with everybody in pharmaceuticals. I don't think about medical device sales. I don't think about insurance sales. I don't think about real estate brokers. I tell you how stupid I was.
Yeah, please.
Okay, and I've been stupid for a long time. But when I was running the pharmaceutical company, it never dawned on me that the vendors that were selling me stuff might ultimately be people who ultimately could hire me. And so, how did I treat them? Like vendors.
I understand.
I should have treated them like partners. And that doesn't mean, now I will tell you, there were some of them who made me treat them like partners because they were so good. One guy was named Sean Feeney.
Okay.
And Sean was a West Point graduate, and he and I, connected because we both went to military school. I'd give him, hell about going to West Point. He'd give me hell about going to VMI. But he sold Salesforce automation, and he was phenomenal. And the guy wound up running 2 or 3 big companies, et cetera. But so I built a relationship with him, which lasts to this day, and that was 30 years ago. But I didn't think about, I need to build a relationship with 100 to 150 people who can change my life. And I need to be building a network with people that are more successful than me. So many people say to themselves, well, gee, Jerry's really successful. I don't think I should approach him. Well, I'm watching Larry King one night, and he's got, it's not Shania Twain, it's Sheryl Crow.
Okay.
So he's got Sheryl Crow. Now, I like Sheryl Crow. I'll be honest with you. She's attractive, and et cetera. And last question he asked her is, what's your love life? She said, well, I don't have one. And I'm thinking, hell, I got to move to California. Of course, then I'm thinking I'm married. I probably can't afford another divorce. But why is nobody asking her? Because they think she won't go. And guess what? If you think she won't go and you don't ask her, you're right. So to me, if you want a relationship, I'll give you an example. I moved to Phoenix, and I love college basketball. I played college football. My grandfather played professional basketball 1,000 years ago. But I've always loved basketball. It was my worst sport, but it was always my favorite sport.
Okay.
So I started mentoring the basketball coach at VMI 15 years ago, and he's now one of my best friends in the entire world. I love him to pieces. And when he got the job, I said to him, hey, and we'd had a bad basketball program for a long time. I said, man, and I heard him speak at an alumni meeting where they had the group that is what we call the leadership group, people who donate over $1,000. And so I listened to him speak, and he was phenomenal. His name is Duger Balcom. Now, the last 14 years, he's led the nation in scoring 11. He's a genius. He's an offensive genius. Now, he's probably also led the nation in points allowed.
Okay. But
I keep telling him, as long as you score more than the other team, that's all that matters. But I met him, and I said, hey, man, when you get fired here, and you probably will, you can come to work for me. He said, well, what do you do? I said, well, I teach people how to sell. And he said, well, could you teach me how to sell VMI? He said, I was a police officer for 20 years, had a heart attack when I was 31, decided at 31 to want to be a college basketball coach. Wow. I didn't even have a college degree. I got a college degree at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and it took me 12 years to get my first job. And now he's, recognized by almost anybody in college basketball as a genius. Wow. He's at the Citadel now, which is our rival.
Wow.
And so anyway, he came to my house, and I said, if you'll just tell me what the recruits say to you, if you'll tell me what the coaches say to you, the AAU coaches, the parents, whatever, I'll tell you what you should say about VMI. Because he said, I didn't go to VMI. So we spent 2 days together at my house in Scottsdale. And then from then on, whenever I would go to Virginia, I would stay at his house, and I'd go to the game, and then we'd always go to dinner, and we just became really close. And then I wound up buying a house 10 years ago in Virginia. So, and then for 5 years that I was living there, he was the coach there. And then he introduced me to the basketball coach at Marquette,
Okay.
who now is the basketball coach at Virginia Tech. And he asked, the guy at Marquette said, do you have a mentor? And he said, yeah. And he said, who is it? He said, well, some VMI alum. He said, well, do you think he'd mentor me?
Wow.
And he said, well, he probably would if you ask him. So I was going to Chicago a lot. Chicago's only 90 miles from Milwaukee. So I drove up there, and I've been working with him for 9 years. And so I just fell into it.
Well, what's resonating with me is relationships.
It's all about relationships. Yeah.
You have 5 laws, and I was looking. You have a board here. And the 4th law is about proactive relationships.
Right.
Explain that. Like, what's the first step to proactive relationships? Because
I got to decide I want one with you. So I wanted one with Herb Sendek.
Okay.
You know, you may not know Herb. Herb is the 4th youngest coach in the basketball, Division I basketball, to 400 victories. Herb is the only coach. Now, only is an interesting term. The only coach in America to be coach of the year in 3 major conferences.
Wow.
Now, I moved to Phoenix, right? I live in Phoenix, and I like college basketball. Well, Arizona State is in Phoenix.
Okay.
It's in Tempe, actually, which is a suburb of Phoenix. And so I didn't know him, but I wanted to meet him. So I made the decision I was going to meet him. So the first thing you have to do is to say, I want to meet this person. Then I went and asked everybody that I knew in Phoenix this question. Now, this is a very interesting question, and most people get this wrong, and this is why I teach it. How well do you know Herb Sendek, if at all?
How well do you know Herb Sendek, if at all? Wow.
Now, people either say don't know him at all, or they'll say I know him pretty well, or I know him really well. Now, if you say really well, my second question is, how comfortable would you be introducing me?
How comfortable would you be introducing me?
Yeah. Now, what would most people ask?
Or, let me meet him.
Exactly.
They're already trying to push.
Exactly. I would just say, how comfortable would you be introducing me? Yeah. Now, you only get 2 answers to that question.
Yeah, what are they?
He's weird. So they'll blame it on him, which really means they misrepresented the value of their relationship, right? But I don't care. Or they'll say, so in this case, David Rich, who's now a really close friend of mine, and actually, even though he's 42 and I'm almost 70, he's one of my mentors. He says, well, I know him really well. He said, I'm on the board of the Sun Devil Club, and you want to have breakfast with him next Monday? And I said, sure. Now, I know if I'm going to breakfast with Herb, 2 things that I want. One is I want to have something in common with him. And that something in common is Duger Balcom. Because I know he knows Duger. Everybody knows Duger Balcom because of the way Duger plays basketball. Wow. And the second thing I know is he's going to want to know from me, what do I want from him? I know that's going to happen. So if I'm meeting somebody that I don't know well, but I want a relationship with them, I'm going to go with those 2 things in mind. 1, what do we have in common? 2, what can I do for you that will help you? And if I don't have anything to help you, then it's probably not a good idea to have the meeting. So I go meet him, and I said, hey, I've been mentoring Duger for an awful long time, and whenever you say Duger Balcom to Herb, his response is 100% the same. I will never play him. And he said, because he'll beat you. Now, Duger and I have been friends for a long time. I went with Duger when he had his first game in 2007 when he beat Kentucky at Kentucky. He was a 31-point underdog. And what was amazing about that game, to me, and there were only 3 VMI alumni there, 24,000 people in Rupp Arena, 3 VMI alumni.
Oh my gosh, imagine that, huh?
And so what's funny is we were up by 22 in the first half, and they came back with 3 minutes left in the game. They took the lead by 3. Now you can imagine what this place was like. They went crazy because they finally caught us. And I'm sitting there saying, man, I'm so proud of our kids because we played a close game. We scored the last 11 points. We won the game by 8.
And it's 23,997 that are against
people.
Okay, yeah,
and
that's
the coach
scary.
got fired at the end.
Did you have any symbolism on you?
No,
or were you undercover?
I
can only imagine.
It was surreal. I mean, in VMI athletic history, it's probably the second biggest victory we've ever had. Now, we've been to the Final 8 in basketball before, but beating Kentucky at Kentucky was a pretty big deal. But now, Duger, he's the coach of Citadel this year. You know, the way college basketball works, you get money games.
Okay.
So they Kentucky paid us, I think, $100,000 to come play them. Well, they pay you, and the small schools take the money because they need it to fund their athletic program.
That makes sense.
The big schools schedule you because they think it's a sure victory.
And it'll bring their brand up.
Right.
Or something.
Duger is to the point where not many people want to schedule him. He's had 2 money games this year. He's won them both.
So does that negatively affect, in a sense of
it never really negatively affects you because you can always find somebody to play it. Like Buzz will play him all the time.
Okay.
Buzz knows he can beat him.
So,
I went to see Herb, and we talked about Duger, and then he finally said, "What do you want from me?"
Because that's the thing in common is someone in relation or some form of commonality you start with.
But you had the commonality with the person who introduced you too, by the way. You remember that?
Of course.
So David, who's a friend of mine, is also a friend of Herb. So if you got somebody to introduce you, you already had that place of commonality. Now I had other commonality, which I took advantage of, right?
How do you do that? Do you research to figure out other common
I
ground?
do all kinds of research. Yeah, and I think with the internet, if you don't do research when you're building networks, you're an idiot.
That's a good point.
Because people talk about cold calls. You know why extroverts are not needed in sales anymore?
Why is that?
Because of the internet. You need extroverts
good point.
When you had no information. You had to be really, really super friendly over the phone. If you have, and by the way, introverts are far better salespeople than extroverts.
What's one major reason why an introvert could surpass?
There's 4 or 5 reasons. One is they're super listeners. Extroverts are lousy listeners. They can't wait for you to shut up so they can talk. The second thing is they seek depth, not breadth. The third thing is they're not afraid of silence. They think about their answer before they give you an answer. They think about what you said. The extrovert is dying to talk. Wow. The next thing is that they're far more interested in you than they are themselves. Now, that is the definition of a great salesperson. Now, the problem is most introverts believe that introversion is equivalent to shyness, which it is not. Introversion is a temperament, right? And you have people like me who are closet extroverts. I presented to 80 people on Monday. Did you think I sounded like an introvert?
No.
I've taught myself. I've taught myself to be that way. Now, this afternoon I'm going to drive 6 hours home, and I'm going to love it being by myself.
When you're alone, are you listening to music? Are you listening to audiobooks? Are you just in your moment?
I never listen to audiobooks. I read books.
Okay.
And I've read 591 business books since 1981. I read 25 a year, and I read 100 book summaries a year. But I like to read, and I like to underline, and I like to make notes, and so I don't do audiobooks. I'm either listening to the radio or I'm talking on the phone. Now, in a 6-hour drive, I will usually be on the phone at least 3 hours. So I'll just tell people, hey, here's a good time to get in touch with me. So I tell people all the time, the easiest way to get in touch with me, and by the way, I think this is true for anybody. Number one, you need their cell number. The faster you get you need their cell number better than you need their email.
Yeah.
You get their cell number, and then I say, the best way to get in touch with me, text me, tell me who you are, because I meet a lot of people. And then what I'll do is I'll capture your number, right? And I'll put it in my phone, and I'll create a contact. So when you text me again, I know who you are. Yeah. And then just ask me, when's a good time to talk? And then I'll look at my calendar, and I'll say, okay, I got 6 hours. I'm going to leave here at 3 o'clock today, and I'll be in the car till probably 8:30 or 9 o'clock. So call during that time, and I'll probably be available. If I'm not available, I'll call you right back.
Has that been your process for years, being as successful as you have been in sales, to make sure you're maximizing your travel, your commutes?
Yeah, well, I spent a lot of time on a plane. So, I wrote my books on planes, and I didn't really write the book. The guy who helped me write the book, Wally Wood, is a godsend.
Wow.
I learned a long time ago that 2 heads are better than one. And so I found a ghostwriter. Okay. And what I would do is I would make an outline of everything I wanted to say, and I would call him on the phone, and I would say, this is what I want this chapter to be about. And then we would just go stream of consciousness. He'd ask me a question, and then he would transcribe it, and then he would turn it into a chapter. And then I would say, well, we need a story on this. He said, okay, I got that. I said, we need a story on this. He says, and I said, okay, I got that. And so that's how we put the book
It's
together.
a lot of team building and leadership ethos. Has that been something that you have worked on over the years, or has been a little bit more intuitive? Team building, leadership.
I don't know. I've always been. I was the captain of my 9th grade football team, and I was captain of the baseball team and the football team in high school. I mean, I've always had leadership ability. When I was a senior in college, the commandant of VMI, who's the guy in charge of all the military stuff, he came to me and said, you're a natural-born leader. I want you to go in the Army because Army needs leaders like you. Wow. So I think it's more intuitive. But you also have to understand, fundamentally, I became the man of the house at 13. And so if you're 13 years old and, your dad's gone and you got, an older sister. And
how many siblings?
I have, well, it depends on.
At the time, you're 13 years old.
4 of us.
There's 4 of you.
So there was 14, 13, 12, and 9. And so
you're the second oldest.
I'm the second oldest, but I'm, my sister and I are not a year apart. And we're
you're the man
11
of the
months
house.
and 2 weeks. So you're the man of the house. And so if you don't learn, but also I had great mentors. I mean, my first, coach, the guy that took me from, I got arrested for shoplifting when I was in the 6th grade, and which was not a good thing. I was smoking and drinking when I was in the 6th grade, and so in the 7th grade, I walk into Sherwood Junior High School in Memphis, Tennessee, and there's a big, tall guy there, bald-headed guy, and he looks at me and he said, "Boy, you need to be playing football." And I said, "What?" He said, "I want you at football practice today at 3:30. You understand?" And I had never played organized football in my life. I'd played, Pee Wee baseball and stuff. Yeah. So I found myself playing football. And this guy's name was Bud Garrett. And, he took me from being a thug to being an athlete. And he was, the 3 years I was there, we never lost a game in football. We'd lose 1 or 2 baseball games. We'd lose 1 or 2 basketball games. And he coached everything. And he was just this phenomenal human being that brought out the best in you.
Wow.
And I was a quarterback. And so, I just had great people enter my life. And one of the things that I tell young people, I'm on the board of a charity called College Orientation Workshop, which is started by an African-American friend of mine named Gene Williams, who I think is one of the greatest humans in the world. Gene started this. Gene went to VMI, same as me, and he was in the 2nd or 3rd class of African Americans because we didn't have African Americans until 1972. Wow. 72? It wasn't 72. 68. Because this year was
that's right after you started VMI.
Yeah, it was 50th anniversary. So there was a group that were 4 of them that was right behind me, and then Gene was 2 years later. Gene was from Thanodisassa, Florida, and I was from Cocoa Beach, and so we hit it off because we were from Florida. He was a freshman. I was a senior, so he didn't play together because, freshmen weren't eligible. But he was the hardest hitting person I ever seen in my life. And I tell people, pound for pound, Gene Williams was the best football player I ever met. Now, he lost a kidney in a game, got hurt.
And this was an individual that wasn't allowed to even be in the school before.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, three years later, we didn't take blacks, and then we take Gene Williams. Well, Gene decides, after he graduates, that this VMI experience changed his life.
Wow.
And so for the last 33 years, he has brought 30 underperforming, talented African-American and Latinos to VMI for a month. Each one of them cost $10,000. He's personally raised the money, and he's got this.
Wait, for a month he's done this every year? He's
every
raised
year,
that much money every year
for 33 years. And then and I'm on his board, and I've been on his board for, 5 years or so.
Wow, that's huge.
But, he really believed that the discipline taught you that you could become way more than you understood you could become.
Was that your first coach's ethos, that discipline could bring you up, or was that Gene?
No. It was, my first ethos was Bud Garrett. When I go talk to the kids, the title of my talk is Finding Bud Garrett.
Why do you say that?
Because everybody needs Bud Garrett in their life.
And Bud was the coach?
Bud was the coach. Everybody needs somebody that believes in you more than you believe in yourself. That you like, trust, respect, and admire. That can get you to see the greatness that's in you that you can't see yourself.
So young, I feel like I attracted a lot of antagonist males in my life. It seems as though you attracted a lot of, having a similar background yourself, it seemed like you attracted protagonists, like positive mentors.
But it's all luck.
Was there anything?
That's all it's luck. And that's why I keep telling these young people, Bud Garrett found me, I didn't find him. But if you want to find Bud Garrett, you got to go find him yourself. Right. And I said, I'm a personal believer that everybody in the world who wants somebody to help them be successful, there's somebody for them. For everybody. Yeah. But they don't know you need help. Nor will they ever if you don't ask them. And so what you have to do is to find people that you like, trust, respect, and admire, that are more successful than you are, and ask them, will they mentor you? Now, you know, me, I probably mentor 12, 13, 14 people. And when I say to people, I say, let me explain to you what mentoring you means. It means you call me and ask me what to do. Huh. But I'm not calling you, and we're not calling once a month. You call me and say, I got an issue, I got a problem.
How long have you been doing that?
35 years.
Did that start while you were working with that pharmaceutical company?
It started when I became a manager. So then I had salespeople where I had to mentor them. Yeah. Right? The first thing I realized, though, was that I didn't know anything about selling, even though I'd been in selling for 6 years. So I read a book called Winning Strategies in Selling by Roger Staubach, who I saw on TV this weekend for Army-Navy game, and he's one of my heroes. Wow. But in a book called Winning Strategies in Selling, he and Jack and Gary Kender quoted a guy named Charlie Tremendous Jones that said, chances are you'll be the same person 5 years from today that you are today, with the exception of two things. The people you meet and the books you read. The person who won't read is truly no better off than the person who can't read. So I read that and said, holy gosh, for 10 years I've been illiterate. I read 3 books from 71 to 81. I read Jaws, QB7, and Anticipation Moving to New Jersey. I read The Godfather.
So in the early 80s, you decided to start reading.
And then I've read one book 79 times. I've read.
What was that book?
Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, which everybody should read 10 times.
Yeah, wow. It's on my bookshelf. I haven't read it 10 times.
You got to read it 10 times, because if you don't read it 10 times, then you don't really understand what he's saying.
When did you read that first?
In 1981. Okay. I read it 20 times that year.
Wow. So you're 6 years in Hearst Russell. Did I say that right?
Russell.
Almost got it. Hearst Russell.
Yeah.
And you're in a management position. Did you accidentally fall in that through hard work, or were you?
Well, I always wanted to be a manager, because I always, being an idiot and from a redneck, background, I always thought, well, you want to be promoted. Yeah. Now, I didn't even know what the hell being a district manager was. I mean, I knew what my guy did. And I took some lessons from him, and some of them were what not to do. Like, it always bothered me that, I lived 4 hours away from where we had our district meetings. And our district meetings would go to 5 o'clock on Friday. And I had a young child that went to bed at 8 o'clock. So on Friday nights, I never got to see my child. So I remember saying to myself, if I ever become a manager, every person in my district will be home at 5 o'clock. No one will miss being with their family. Wow. Now, the other thing, though, that he taught me, which was one of the greatest lessons I ever had, and he taught me this after I'd been there 3 months, this guy's name was Jim Crutchfield, is that nothing is more important than family. Nothing. So my uncle dies. And my uncle was 17 years older than my father, and he raised my father because my father's dad moved away. And so my dad and his mother and his younger sister moved in with my uncle. His name was Bride. And Uncle Bride was very successful, owned a bunch of moving companies. And so, Dad was basically raised by his uncle. Well, ultimately that meant he was like my grandfather. Of course. Well, he dies at 63. I've been with the drug company 3 months. So the first thing I do when I find
25.
out that I'm 27.
Okay.
So the first thing I do is I go to the policy procedure manual and I read, what's the bereavement policy? Well, mother, father, grandfather, grandmother, brother, sister, etc. So I don't even think to ask my boss, can I go to the funeral? Now I live in Virginia, funeral's in Memphis. He died suddenly of a heart attack on the moving van. And so just so happens my boss called me that day, and we were shooting a bull, and he said, well, how things going? I said, well, not very good. My uncle died. And he said, well, which uncle, how was he related to your mom or your dad? And so I explained to him that he was my de facto, grandfather. And he said, well, when you leaving? I said, I'm not going anywhere. He said, yes, you are. You're going to Memphis. He said, if that guy is that close to you, then he said, F the policy and procedure manual.
Wow.
He said, your place is with your father. So my expectation is you get in your car and get the hell to Memphis. And so I ain't earned anything yet. I've hardly been through school. I can hardly pronounce the names of our products. And what does this guy demonstrate to me? Family matters. Now, I'm telling you, I'm almost 70, and there's anybody in this building here that works for me will tell you nothing's more important than family. Now, where did I learn that? I learned that from Jim Crutchfield.
Wow, that's powerful.
With one simple act. One simple act. F the policy procedure. You go to Memphis. That's your place. So I just, so much of my success has been two things. One is fear of failure, because I'm engrossed in being scared of of failing. And so I have this saying that I say to myself all the time: failure's not an option. Failure's not. So my self-talk is failure's not an option. So I'm not going to fail. It may take me longer to succeed than it does everybody else, but I'm going to succeed. And then, the second thing is, that family matters.
Well, so I want to speak on failure's not an option. You worked your way through those ranks in 20 years to be the VP of a $675 million company, the top in the whole world in pharmaceuticals. You had 500 plus reps on you.
Right.
Last year, you won multiple awards for your current company, which we're going to get into. Delta Point, right? Correct. And in Arizona, which you do live there still or no?
I have a home in.
You have a home
Arizona,
there,
and
Virginia.
Yeah.
We're in Philadelphia right now.
Right. Wow. Well, my main office is here in Philadelphia. This is a regional office. Our home office is in
Scottsdale, Arizona.
Right.
Family and fear of failure has brought you to the point where you've impacted millions of people.
But I've had lots of failure too. I've had a boatload of failure.
What's the biggest nugget of failure that you reflected upon to bring you here that you could admit?
When I left the pharmaceutical business, I was stupid and arrogant, and that's not a good combination. And I'm a fairly wise guy, but I always thought that I could do better on my own than I could do working for another company. I always had this idea that I wanted to run a $5 million business. That's what I wanted to do. And so when I had the opportunity to leave Hearst, I did, believing I could do better on my own.
Okay.
Well, I had just gone through a divorce, so I lost all the money. I got the house and the child and the tuition, and I had to borrow $123,000 from 17 different credit cards to finance my business over 4 years.
And this is JBI.
And it took me 5 years to get back to where I was before I left the drug company.
So you left the drug company in 1994, and at the time, huge success.
Right.
To what the world sees.
To become a miserable failure at running my own business.
You worked with hospitals from 95 to about 2000. Yeah. It took 5 years to getting that going. What was the big aha, this is almost 20 years ago at this point, to hit you? You're in your late 40s, early 50s to wake up.
Well, what happened was we had the company sold for $7 or $8 million to a drug wholesaler, and then the day that they would come to due diligence with us, we got bought. They got bought, so that scrapped that deal, which I would have made several $1 million. And then what they did was they lent us money to build a software program, which I created and was the father of. And now, I got to understand this is 1997. I created a software program that's
killer. This is when the dot-com boom?
Yeah, well,
right around that era? Right before it? Okay.
Boom. But it was basically, how do you diagnose a failing hospital pharmacy? And there are many of them. And so I created this software. Well, one of our big drug wholesalers wanted it. So instead of buying us, they lent us $500,000 so we could complete the development of the software program. So we did that, and then as it turned out, they bought another company which already had the same kind of business, but they didn't have a software. So they decided to call the loan and either get their money back and build their own software program, or not get their money back and take over ours. Well, as it turns out, we didn't pay them back, and they took over the software. So I had to go get a job. So I went and got a job at a company in Phoenix that a guy had been wanting me to come help him run his company. I was VP of sales, and after about 15 months, he fired me. And he fired me because he said he couldn't trust me. I had sided with the CEO on an issue. He was the founder, and he thought I should have sided with him because he was my friend. And I said, I'm not siding with you because you're my friend. I'm siding with whoever's right. So he fired me. So at 51, I had a 1-year-old. I had a $500,000 house with a $400,000 mortgage. I had no job, and I couldn't find anybody who wanted to hire me.
At 51, you had a 1-year-old?
Yep.
That's a miracle.
So he's 18 now, and he's
What's his name?
Ryan, and he's at my college.
Wow, Virginia Military Institute. Okay, so a lot of people may be watching this, and they're thinking we see it every day. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but a 30-something-year-old thinking their life's over. What advice do you give to someone in their 30s and 40s that's in a position that you were in when you were in your 50s?
Right.
Because you come full circle. There's a whole other chapter we didn't even scratch, which is your successful company today.
Right.
What advice? What do you say to them?
I say if you haven't built a successful network of people that can save you, you're crazy. Because what saved me was my network. And I'll give you an example.
Yeah, please.
So I'm looking for a job. So who do I call? I call everybody I know. And several people were interested, but they had jobs that I was not interested in. So I'd walk every day.
Okay.
Right, I was unemployed for 3 months. I had enough money to last me maybe 5 or 6 months. But I figured if I could find something to sell, because I'm a pretty good salesperson, I'd be fine. And so a guy that used to work for me, I actually had dinner with him on Thursday night.
Like this week?
This week.
Oh, wow.
He wound up being the president of AstraZeneca in China. Now, I hired him as a sales rep in 1986.
Wow.
And now, of the people that I hired, of the 20 people I hired, 13 of them got promoted. So I had a great track record for hiring, people with upside potential. But so anyway, he calls me on the phone and asks me to do a speech. And I said, well, why do you? And I'm broke, and I got no money coming in, and I can't find anything to sell, and I got no job. So he says, I want you to do a speech. I said, for what? He said, well, I got 67 people in the marketing department. They all want to hold hands, sing songs. Nobody wants to be accountable for anything, and you're the most motivational speaker I've ever heard. And I want you to come in and motivate them to get accountable. And I said, well, you're wasting your money. And I said, now, I got to be honest with you. I could use the money, but for you to think that I'm going to change these people's behavior, which I'm assuming is your goal, with a speech is idiotic, because I'm not going to do that. So he said, well, what do I need? I said, well, you need a consulting project from somebody who really understands change management. And what they need to do is to work closely for 6 months with you and your leadership and engender the exact change that you want to engender. And then maybe in the middle of that, there's a speech. But there's a project there.
Yeah.
And he said, can you do that? And I said, yes, I can. I said, I have developed this change management process just inadvertently while I was working at the other company because I saw such barrier to change. So I went back and I did a retrospective analysis of all the change that I had tried to lead that had not done well. And I came up with the fact that there are 6 elements of a successful change management program. 2 of them are the places where most change breaks down. Most people don't understand what they are. So I said, I can do it. So he said, well, send me a proposal. Now, I don't even have a company. So I walked down the street to a lawyer, and I say, create me an LLC and call it Delta Leadership Group. Now, I and Mary Ann are the leadership group. Mary Ann's my wife. Now, we got a 1-year-old.
Yeah.
But now I got a project for $45,000. And so in the middle of that project, he says to me, well, you were number 1 in every product that we sold when you were my district manager. We were number 1 7 out of 8 years. And so he said, can you help us learn how to sell this product? It's $350 million at the time. And he said, you're a genius at that. I mean, you go ride with, really smart people and you come back and tell us what to do. And we were successful with every product. And he said, you think you could do that? And I said, probably could. So he said, send me a proposal. So now I got my second proposal. That one was $75,000. So literally, I've gone from broke to $125,000 in 3 months.
And this is the early 2000s?
This is 2001.
2001.
That's when I started my company.
Wow.
And so then in 2 years, that product went from $350 million to $1 billion.
In how many years?
2 years.
2 years.
2 years. Based on them. Now, they did some things themselves, but I was probably responsible for a third of that. Now, a third of $600 million is $200 million, and the guy paid me $75,000.
It's usually worth it to invest in a coach.
I'd say. So then I got the reputation that if you have a product that's difficult to sell, if you have a product that you're launching and you can't afford to fail, then Jerry, or you have a complex message, then you probably ought to call Jerry. And so that's what caused Delta Point to be born. We got into the business of teaching people how to sell products that were hard to sell. And we've done 162 of them in 17 years, and we've been successful 160 times.
Okay, well, so very complex conversations simplified into relationship-founded conversation. I watch a lot of your videos, being able to just ask questions and listen and figure out what is going on. What hit me hard was helping people think. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I always say, I was reading Jeffrey Gitomer's book, The Little Red Book of Sales Answers, and I love Jeffrey Gitomer. But Jeffrey's best book it's either The Patterson Principles, which is phenomenal, or it's The Little Red Book of Sales Answers. It's not The Little Red Book of Selling, which is probably his biggest seller. The Little Red Book of Sales Answers says people hate to be sold, but they love to buy. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying, well, gee, if people hate to be sold, but they love to buy, why do we teach people how to sell? Why don't we teach people how to buy in? Different concept.
And that's your other book.
Stop acting like a seller, start thinking like a buyer. Okay. And that's when so what I did was, so I've taught everybody here at Delta Point the same way. And of course, all of these people here have made my stuff 10 times better than I could ever do it. I mean, again, it's two heads are better than one. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've got the smartest people in the world in how to sell pharmaceuticals here that you can possibly. Nobody in the world has a group of people that are experts in selling and marketing pharmaceuticals than this group here at Delta Point. And so we basically start with what is the belief of the customer, because if you don't change the belief, you never change the behavior. So first we go and understand the belief of the customer. We understand the belief of the rep, because you got to understand that too. Yeah. And then we go about saying, okay, how do you change those beliefs? Well, the way you change those beliefs is by being a good listener and asking great questions, and then having the fortitude to ask the person to give you a little bit of their business. If you ask for a little, you get a lot. If you ask for a lot, you get a little. What do most people ask for? A lot. And they get a little and they wonder why. We teach people how do you ask for a little and get a lot.
In the sense of like the Chinese proverb, you drop a pebble down a mountain.
Well, no, if you say to a doctor, if you had to guess, we always teach people to say things, if you had to guess. Okay. If I say, how many people this week do you see, how many people this month do you think you'll see with diabetes? What's your answer going to be? I don't know.
Yeah, it's
lousy
too
question.
Logical. Yep.
But if I say, if you had to guess about how many people you think you might see, what are you going to say?
Yeah, they'll
probably 20.
Guess. Yeah.
And I'm going to say, okay, don't give it to 20 people. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Just give it to 3 or 4.
That's very powerful.
Can I ask you to do that? Now, what are they accustomed to the sales rep asking for?
A lot.
All 20.
Which comes across selfish and already insecure.
Exactly. Because we just come back and say, look, all we're trying to prove is that what we told you our product will do, it'll do. So just try it in 3 or 4 people. The rest of them do it yourself. But get some experience and find out whether this product performs the way we say it performs. If it does, then you'll figure out who are the right patients for it and who are the not right, or the patients that are wrong for it. And then it'll be your decision.
I'm curious, what methodology did you use to come with that hypothesis? Was that all the years of you doing it?
Well, I read Cialdini's book, which is the classic. where he says, if you ask for a little, you get a lot. If you ask for a lot, you get a little. But the other thing I did was I went back to my days in high school where I would not ask a girl out unless I knew she was going to say yes. So what I did was I created a closing sequence where the customer never says no. They either say yes or they say yes, but. Now, yes, but is no, but they're about to tell me the reason why they're not buying, which puts me into the objection handling process. But at least I understand why they ain't buying. The average salesperson leaves and never really understands why they're not buying. We teach people how to find out why they ain't buying.
What's the most important reason to find out why they're not buying right now?
Because if I don't know why you're not buying it, I don't know how to address it. So I'll give you a simple example. I'll say to one of the biggest objections that people get, and it doesn't matter what you're selling, is that we're in the habit of doing this. I'm in the habit of choosing this vendor to clean our office every Friday night.
Yeah.
We're in the habit, and we've had success with them, et cetera. So if the habit objection never comes, and they keep giving you the runaround, then you say, look, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I know this. A lot of people do things simply because of habit. Is it fair to say that one of the reasons that keeps you from having, that causes you to have some reservations or hesitations about thinking, not using, thinking about our product or service, is that you're simply in the habit of doing something else?
And then more likely to
and
say
they'll
yes
go,
or something.
yeah, truthfully, that's the answer. And then I'll say, well, I don't blame you. Heck, habits are really important. You know why? Habits save us time. Habits reduce the amount of thinking that we have to do. So they're incredibly important. I said, now, what you're telling me, and this is what bothers me, what you're telling me is that I haven't given you enough reasons to want to break that habit. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you 3 reasons right now why you're going to want to break that habit at least for 3 weeks. That's all I'm going to do. Can I do that?
Yes.
And then I'm going to go tell you the same damn thing I told you last week. But I've already gotten your commitment that you'll actually give it a fair trial in 3 or 4 patients, because I'm going to force you to tell me that habit's the issue, in which case you'll come to your own conclusion that ain't a great reason for me to not reconsider.
Yeah, you didn't tell them, they said it.
They said it themselves.
Well, I'm curious, when you got that call, it seems the world is crumbling around. This is before Delta Point. This is when it really started, the inception. Yeah. You solved that problem. You told the truth to your old employee.
Right.
Why?
Because that's who I am. I went to a college that said you don't lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. And so my grandfather used to say to me, and if I remember anything my grandfather said, he was 6'7", and my mother was his only child. And every summer for 16 years, he took us to St. Louis to see the Cardinals play for 3 games, and we'd spend a week with him. He was a traveling salesman.
Wow.
And he would always say this, son, never forget this. A man is only as good as his word. And so I just grew up, believing that you ought to be honest with people. I go into clients now and say, look, I don't have a clue whether I can help you or not. I got a call tomorrow with a client that could give us a fairly significant project. But the truth is, I don't know whether we can help her or not. First place, I don't know what she's done. I have no idea what if she's doing what I would have done?
Explain it. What do you mean? Without giving too much details, but.
Well, I mean, they may already be teaching people, the art of questioning or whatever. And if that's the case, and if that's what I'm going to do, then I'd say then we're not any good for it. I go into presentations with clients. I take a legal pad with a series of questions. I don't even take a computer. And they'll say, well, I thought we were going to see a capabilities presentation. I said, it's a bad idea. They say, why? I said, because I don't know if I can help you or not. I said, and it makes no sense for me to tell you how great my company is, and then we've won all these awards and how smart we are, if I can't help you.
It's funny because that in itself would actually contradict everything that you teach if you didn't do what you just said.
Exactly. So I go.
And how often do we see that?
I say, so what I want to do is ask you questions for 15 or 20 minutes. At the end of that 15 or 20 minutes, you'll come to one of 2 conclusions. You will decide that I cannot help you, in which case you will leave here and get 40 minutes of your meeting back. Or you're going to decide that we can help you, and you ain't leaving this meeting because you need the help. Now, can I ask you the questions?
Most of the time they say yes.
100% of the time they say ask the questions.
Who would say no, right?
And I'll say, well, tell me what you've done. And they say, this. How'd it work? Didn't work at all. I said, can I make the assumption that you really don't want to hire somebody? You would far prefer to do this yourself.
Yeah.
And they say, yes, you can make that. I said, well, then why are you talking to me?
And they'll tell you.
And they'll say, because we can't do it. I got them.
Yeah.
Once they say, I can't do it myself, then they got to hire somebody who has more expertise in it than we do. So then my next question was, do you know why people aren't buying your product? No. And they said, we think we do. Oh, I said, well, what do you think it is? We think it's because they're loyal to the other product. I said, well, what if you're wrong? Because I'm going to tell you, this is the second product I've worked in this category, and I will guarantee you that ain't the problem. I can tell you what the problem is, but I'm not going to tell you because I want to prove it before I tell you what my hypothesis is. But I can tell you it's not because they're loyal to the other product.
How do you prove it in the company?
Then they got to hire you. So I said, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and come back and tell you why they're not buying, and then and I said, let me tell you something. And this is true. Now their goal was a 40 share. This was a product we were working on, right? And they had 18 share, and each share point's $10 million. So they're $220 million behind where they're supposed to be. And I said, if I'm right, and I'm pretty sure I am, we'll change your trajectory in a very short period of time. All you have to do is let us do the discovery. We'll come back and tell you what the issue is and what we would do to solve it. And if you don't like that, you don't have to go forward with us. All of our projects are done in phases so that people don't have to sign up for some gigantic project. They're signing up to find out whether they like us or not. And so we come back and say, here's the issue. And they go, wow. And I said, this is very simple to solve. Here's how you solve it. You tell them these products are similar, but they're not the same. When they came out, you thought they were the same. The truth is they're not the same. So what you have to do is to say to yourself, what are the differences and when do they matter? And then which patients would be better off on the other drug and which patients would be better off on ours? And then 100% of the doctors would say, well, how would I know? And then I'd ask them a question. What percentage of these patients that you ordinarily treat have an adverse event? And they'd say all of them. And I say, okay, what percentage of those patients, if they have an adverse event, would that be problematic? And they'd say 30%, 40%. I said, well, those are people you should have given our drug to. And then they'd say, why? And then I'd explain it to them. They said, well, gee, I didn't know that. So we took them from 10 to 52 in 9 months.
It's huge. Would you say that setting it up with the discovery, in a sense, qualifies
you can't do
every
anything.
party?
You can't. I don't care if you're teaching selling and you don't do discovery, you're crazy. Because you have to talk their language. Now, see, the one thing that we've done to differentiate ourselves at Delta Point, and this is one of the things that I think has made us so successful, there's a lot of people that will teach you how to sell. Charlie Brennan will teach you how to sell. Paul Cherry, who I love, he wrote a great book. He wrote the best questioning book ever called Questions That Sell. He lives in Wilmington. He's a great guy. They'll teach you how to sell, but they teach you generically. What we say is, we're going to teach you how to sell your product. So I'm going to learn your product. I'm going to learn your sales force. And when I teach you how to open the call to generate interest, I'm going to give you the openers that make me want to listen, that are germane to your product, that lead to the product discussion you want to have. Then I'm going to give you the questions to ask. Then I'm going to tell you how to tell the story. Then I'm going to tell you how to respond to the objections. Then I'm going to tell you how to close the call for your product. And no one else in America will do that.
And it makes so much sense culturally because there's 192 countries, there's thousands upon thousands of ethoses or belief systems, that if it isn't done necessarily like that, no one in the world, from a physical standpoint, could guarantee success.
Plus you differentiate yourself because nobody else has got the guts to do it.
100%.
Nobody else is saying, I give you a simple example. I was, early in my career, I had convinced the people at a major pharmaceutical company that they needed me to actually create their playbook for their launch. In other words, how do you open the call? And we don't give them scripts. We give them ideas. Here's 12 good openers. Here's 10 good questions. And you got to understand, salespeople that we're dealing with in any industry are really smart, and so they can determine whether this question, this opening would work for them. They can massage it and use their own. Because I tell everybody, I'm not trying to turn everybody into me. I'm trying for you to be your best you. I'm just trying to give you some ideas that I know will generate the conversations that you want to have.
The language necessary to succeed, it sounds like.
But for that product.
For that product.
And so, anyway, the training department of this company calls me and says, well, we've already hired this guy to teach questioning, and we think your stuff is duplicative. So the only way that we're going to hire you is if he tells us that we should hire you. So their vendor has to tell them to hire me. Now, this is 2002.
Okay.
So you got to call him and tell him what you're going to do and see whether, they should hire you. So what's the first thing I do?
Look for someone that you both know?
I read his book.
Okay, yes.
You ever see the movie Patton?
No, I haven't.
Patton went to VMI. He went to 1 year and then he went to West Point. But at one point in time, when he beat Rommel, who was the great tank commander, he said, Rommel, I read your damn book. So I read this guy's book, right? So before I call him, I read his book. And so I call him on the phone. I said, hey, Charlie, Jerry Acuff, and he knew I was going to call. I said, I have to tell you, I love your book. I said, your dialogue probes are genius. Genius. I said, now, your multi-layer probing questions, I think, are too complicated for the average person. But they're still genius. And I said, let me ask you this question. I said, you've got a 3-hour workshop. You got all 150 people here. You're going to teach these people how to ask questions, correct? He said, yes. I said, are you going to teach them what questions to ask when they go out on Monday and launch the product? And he said, well, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, okay. So you're going to teach them questioning. I said, what percentage of the people in that audience are going to get it so good that they'll be good on Monday? He said 10%. I said, okay, so let's say I wanted to get good at it and I wasn't in that 10%. How long would it take me to get good at it? He said 6 months. I said, okay, let me give you a big thought here. These people ain't got 6 months to make this product successful. They got to be successful when they leave this meeting on Friday night. They got to know exactly what to do on Monday. The difference between you and me, I'm going to actually create the questions. Now, what I'm going to do, because they like your framework, is I'm going to use your framework to create the questions that they should be asking. So I'm going to be reinforcing what you do, but I'm going to be giving them the questions. And their first year objective was a 26.9 share, and they had a 52. And when I ended, their share was 83. And he called him and said, you got to hire this guy.
So that was his response after you had that conversation?
After we had that conversation, he said, I'm not going to learn that product. I said, well, I am. And I'm going to teach him how to sell it.
So bring this into the fact that your company, Delta Point, is in a position to offer virtual Jerry Acuff.
Yes.
To be interactive, where they can actually track and monitor everything through the software that you've invested in, right? You've created. So there's accountability and role play. How does that work, and how does that offer that same value to grow companies, and not just the medical, not just that, but all industries? Because at the end of the day, we all need questions. In our lives.
Well, my program has goal setting, number one. Okay. I think you got to be good at goal setting. Otherwise, you're going to be average. Secondly, it needs relationship building, because you got to have a network. And 75% of the people that you meet, you don't naturally connect with. And I teach you how do you connect with those people. I also teach you how do you leverage relationships for mutual benefit, how do you maintain relationships, and how you use unexpected thoughtful acts to catapult you up the pyramid. And then we teach people how to be persuasive without being pushy and aggressive, which is our superstar salesperson. And then we have a superstar sales coach, which is how do you coach selling. See, one of the things that's fascinating is that if you talk to people about coaching is a very large term. It means coaching personal development, coaching accountability, coaching everything. We just teach people how do you coach selling. How do you get somebody better at opening, questioning, telling the story, answering questions, responding to feedback, and then asking for the business. And so we've created a whole program that does that. So the way it works, and the way I envision that it works, is number one, we have one client who's already bought 700 subscriptions to it. They have 700 reps, and they want one for each one of their reps because they believe in our system of teaching people how to buy in. So they want the rep to constantly be able to go and say, hey, I want to go re-listen to Jerry's stuff on questioning. I want to re-listen to Jerry's stuff on opening.
Because the rep wouldn't normally have your time.
The rep's not got my time because I don't have the time to be with them, and I don't have time to talk to them. But I do have time for them to watch and 95% of my lessons are 5 minutes or less.
So you're able to go in an organization, deconstruct to figure out what language is necessary based on those questions. So the product for that organization is...
Well, the product is generic. I mean, the virtual training, we just created generic for any industry.
Understood.
So we basically say there's only 5 things that happen in a sales call. There's only 8 things that matter, right? So you got to plan the call. You got to set goals. You got to build relationships. You got to open the call. You got to ask questions. You got to tell your story. You got to respond to feedback, and you got to ask for the business. We teach people how do you coach each one of those. We teach people how do you do each one of those. And so our current clients, some of our current clients use it for their reps. Some of our clients use it for their managers to use with their reps because they want the rep to get better at questioning. So they say, go do that. We've got smaller clients who can't afford, to have us come out and do a workshop. So they just buy the virtual training and say, okay, we got 35 people, and here's how we're going to teach selling. Jerry's, virtual training system. And then we've got a superstar sales coach program that we're launching next year, where I'm going to give people my sales virtual training program, my superstar sales coach, and then once a week for 6 weeks, I'm going to coach them on how do you be great at coaching selling in the field in real time. And so I'll give them a lesson on Monday. I'll do a call on Friday. Half the call will be me reviewing the content. The other half will be me taking whatever questions they have. And then in addition to that, each one of those 30 people, because there'll be 30 maximum, gets a one-on-one hour with me to talk about their own specific issue. And then at the last week of the 6 weeks is us going over the resources that we're going to give them that makes it easy for them to coach. So, for example, we give them 12 webinars. So 1 webinar a month you can be doing with your salespeople that reinforces all this stuff. We also give them 4 individual development programs. So if I want you to get better at questioning, I'm going to say, Jay, here's the self-development program on questioning. If you do this program, and it's got a leader's guide, it's got a facilitator's guide, and it's got job aids. If you do that program and invest 4 hours over the next 12 weeks, you'll get dramatically better at that skill. And they get all of that for a fee.
Wow. Now, when, in the ever-changing environment of coaching and speaking and so on, what are some of the things that you see coming in the next 5 years to impact the industry, being that you've had such a wealth of knowledge in the industry, been successful in the industry, 162 for 162 large clients.
162.
Okay, all right.
One of them, the client didn't listen to me, so it's their fault, not mine.
Respect. So out of such a high, that's like a 99.999 whatever conversion of success. What do you see occurring right now in the world when it comes to the industry?
Our business is interesting because the business is shrinking, so that the major diseases can now be controlled. Many of the major diseases can be controlled by generics. And so the business is gravitating towards specialty diseases, ultra-rare diseases, orphan drugs, and oncology.
Okay.
And all of those have smaller sales forces.
Understood.
Now, the interactions are important, and it's one of the reasons why our business hasn't shrunk, even though that the number of pharmaceutical reps has gone from 110,000 to 55.
How many years is that?
Over the last 10 years. Wow. And so our business hasn't shrunk because of that. What we find is that companies are far less interested today in paying for consultants than they are for training. So we're doing more training than we are consulting. Now, most of our training still involves us consulting because we're having to do discovery in order to create the training.
Of course.
So like, tomorrow I got 3 interviews with a client. I'm teaching them how to ask questions and how to close on a challenging product for Parkinson's disease. So I've got to create a workshop that's customized for them, but it's a workshop. Whereas before, people would hire us and say, we're going to hire you for a year, and we're going to pay you a retainer, and then we want you at this meeting, this meeting, this meeting, this meeting. We want you to do this many workshops. And so our business is changing to more workshop-oriented, more training stuff. The second thing is that companies are realizing, and there was that one this morning where I was doing a podcast, that the sales forces that they're hiring are not responding to traditional training. They want short videos. They want podcasts. They want whiteboard animation. They want things that really keep their interest because they're millennials. And by 2025, 70% of all the sales force, of all the workforce will be millennials. And so we're being asked to modernize our content. So it's the same content, but we're just chunking it out. And actually, it's not the same content because we've learned a lot the last 8 years since we've done it for some of these companies. And we've trained probably half of the pharmaceutical reps in America.
Wow.
But now people are wanting it modernized. They want more workshops. And so our challenge, and one of the reasons why we introduced the virtual training, is so that we could expand our customer base outside of life sciences.
Yeah, I was going to ask because now with the fact you're seeing a lot of, I guess the culture is moving towards they're interested in training. That's a reflection of that the marketplace in general is interested in training. Right. So are you interested in working with other industries that are that?
We are locked and loaded on financial planners.
Wow.
Because
in the past you weren't. This was something no one could get to.
No.
But now they can.
Now we can get to virtual. Now we can use the virtual training to get to financial planners and real estate brokers, and business owners in places like ADP, where they're all in sales. Most of them are in commission sales. I've done a lot of individual consulting with people. I checked into the Wynn Hotel a couple of years ago, and this tall woman says to me, why are you here? I said, I'm speaking to 1,000 people tomorrow. And she said, what are you speaking on? I said, selling. She said, really? She said, I'm in sales. I said, what are you selling? She said, final expense insurance. Huh. And I said, well, why are you selling that? And she said, well, because when my mother died, my brother and I were left with all of her cost. And it was a huge drain on us. So I said, this is something I can believe in. And I said, well, why don't I send you a copy of my book and read it, and if it can help you, call me, and I'll be happy to help you. So I, got her card, and I sent her the book, and I forgot about it. And a month later, she calls me, and I'm driving from here back to Virginia, and I'm on the phone with her. So I said, well, how's it going? She said, well, your book is fantastic, but I don't know how to apply it to my business. And I said, well, tell me how they teach you to do the job. Well, they advertise, and they give me leads. And then they want me to go to these people's house, and they want me to push my way in and then, be assertive and make these people buy. Now, we're talking about old ladies and old women, that are 65 and 70 and haven't saved anything for final expense insurance, et cetera. So I said, well, how's that working for you? She said, well, it's not working at all. I said, why? She said, because I'm not comfortable doing it. I said, well, do you want me to tell you how you can actually get more people to talk to you? She said, yeah. I said, very easy. I said, do you have these people's phone numbers? She said, yes. I said, all right, here's what you do. You call them on the phone, and you say, this is Shannon. I'm with this company. Got your request for the information. Now, I'm going to make the assumption that because this is about your final expenses, it's really important. And so what I'd like to do is rather than mail it to you, I'd really like to just bring it over and give it to you in person. Now, but before you say yes to that, I want you to know exactly what that meeting is going to look like. Because I'm going to walk in the door and I'm going to hand you that information. I'm not going to say a thing to you. I'm not going to ask you a question. I'm going to give you the information you requested. Then I'm going to ask you 3 questions. And at the end of those 3 questions, you're either going to ask me to stay or I'm going to know it's my time to go. Can I come by? You think she's getting more appointments?
Heck yeah.
Okay. Now, what's her next question? What's the sales rep's next question?
When can I come?
What questions do I ask?
Oh, okay.
She don't know what questions to ask.
Yeah, so she's asking them.
She's asking me.
Understood.
What questions do I ask?
She's asking you.
You're telling me I got to ask them 3. What 3 questions do I ask them? I said, all right, here's the first thing you say. Mrs. Jones, there's no right or wrong answer to this question. You have to understand that, okay? But if I ask you, I have a lot of money saved for my final experiences, I have some money saved for my final experiences, I have no money saved for my final experiences, what would the answer be? Now, if they say she's got a lot of money saved, then you're wasting your time. If she says I have some money saved, there may be a pony under that pile. If I have no money saved, then you ask the next question.
What's that?
The next question is, okay, then you acknowledge that's exactly the situation I found myself in when my mom died. She did not have much money saved, and it's why I'm so passionate about this, because frankly, it became a huge burden to me. So here's my second question. If by chance you pass, and we know you will, we just don't know when, your family's going to be heartbroken. Who's going to wind up with this financial challenge?
She'll tell you.
I actually want a real name. And so she'll say, my brother Fred. And you'll say, okay, here's the third question. How problematic is that financial burden going to be to Fred? Now, there's only two answers to that question. Fred's worth $20 million and he don't give a damn. Or Fred ain't got no money, it's going to be a huge problem. And if she says it's number two, it's going to be a huge problem for Fred, then you're going to say, can we sit down and talk about it? Because this is clearly something that if you can afford, you would benefit from. Now, you think she's selling more?
Yeah, 1,000,000,000%, because the first question, if you're even going to keep asking the second, so that's time right there that you just saved the woman, and then you've already basically figured out if it's worth going there or not over the phone when you were going to go there in the person, but you don't really need to do that because you've already figured out, can you help this person or not? And the sales rep is doing it from contribution, from passion, from love, not like desire, which is what she believed before, it sounds like from the story.
The less you care about the sale, the more you sell. So when I go into calling somebody, I don't care about the sale. I care about, can I help them or not? If I can help them, and I'm going to move heaven and earth to get them to see it.
Before you worked with the pharmaceutical company that you rose the ranks and life hit you, let's just say, the wake-up call, was there a paradigm shift in how you viewed it? No. My boss, and this is why I say I won the boss lottery. Yeah.
My first boss was Jim Crutchfield. And the first thing Jim said to me was, the most important advice I can give to you, Jerry, is be yourself. So what did he do? He gave me permission to be an introvert. He gave me permission to be, he said, I'm going to teach you the fundamentals. I'm going to teach you what does it take to be successful in selling, but what you've got to do is just go out and be you. So I wound up as a manager.
Yeah.
So now what's interesting about the manager, the guy who was my manager was 82 years old. He just wrote a book about dementia because his wife died of dementia. It's called Dementia of the Mind but Not of the Heart. And I'm going to help him hopefully make this thing a bestseller. And what's interesting about him is when I tell you about the three coaches, he was the common figure because he hired my boss and he hired the other guy who was my boss. And so this guy here is the glue and when people ask me, the greatest coach you ever had, I say Gene. Now, Don actually had more impact on my life than Gene did because of one thing that he told me, but Don would never have been Don without Gene.
And Don was the one that said, go see your family, correct?
No, that was Jim.
Okay.
Don was the person who told me that the job of regional manager was too small for me. I should be running the company.
So did he gave you a big why, in a sense, or a big belief in yourself?
Yeah, I mean, he convinced me that my life's dream of being a regional manager and having 150 people working for me was way too small for my capability. And he said to me, this is after he had beat me out for a regional manager job. And he came to Birmingham and said, I came here tonight to tell you two things. I came here to tell you, number one, you should have got this job, not me. You're far more qualified than I am. But they didn't give it to you. They gave it to me, and I'm not giving it back. And he said, but I'm also going to tell you that this job's not big enough for you. You need to be running our company. And I promise you, I will not stop advocating on your behalf until you're running the company. And 5 years later, I was running the company. So I would not be here today if it were not for him.
Before he said that, did you think that?
No, I always thought I'd be a regional manager. I had my life planned out. Be a regional manager by the time I'm 40. I do that from 40 to 55. And at 55, I retire. I make half of my salary for the rest of my life. And I go, eat bonbons and sit by the ocean. And next thing I know, I'm running a company. I'm VP of sales. I'm VP general manager. And now I got the street cred to go out and actually create a real business.
You're 13. You have 8 siblings. You're the second youngest, correct?
No, there's only 6 of us.
Because you said there was.
There's two. There's a half brother and a half sister.
That was your father who had 8.
No, my father was he was the next youngest of 8.
Of 8, yeah. Got it. And you had 6 siblings.
I have 5 siblings.
You were the second oldest, though.
Second oldest.
Your mother and father were married, and then he passed away?
My mother and father were married between them 9 times.
What does that mean?
Well, she was married 5 times. He was married 4 times.
Understood.
They married each other twice.
They married each other twice.
Right.
Were they real young when they met?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I have to do the calculation. My mother died in 1999, and she was 69. So at the age of, and let's see, I was in 69. In 99, I was born in 49. I was what?
50.
50. So she had me when she was 20. She had my sister when she was 19.
And
she obviously got pregnant at 18.
Yeah. And then they were apart.
She had 3 children within 2 years and 1 month.
And that was with your father.
Yep.
And did she have children with another boyfriend or husband?
She had a child who's now in jail in Florida. He had a lousy upbringing.
Yeah, because Linda, the mother who had me, had a few miscarriages and abortions, and she was in a schizophrenic tear when she left me at the foster home. So I was adopted by a woman who was 50.
Really?
Yeah. So it's just when you say all that about how your life went into another chapter at 50, it's surreal almost. Like this here, listening to the story. Barbara took me in when she was 50. I was 3 months old. You had a child a year when you started your new career,
right?
And it's just very interesting. And having she did not have any relationships up to that point. She had been divorced 3 times, so it was like I was the man of the house,
right?
Growing up,
yeah.
It's interesting psychologically the independence that is thrust on you, that you either become better from it or bitter. And after fundamentally my temperament being extroverted my whole life, show me, look at me, because I felt abandoned, and doing interviews to help shut that down, it's just very surreal to me. It's like it was two opposites of the same coin.
Yeah.
But just the conversation is.
I'm a person who is a big believer in, being authentic and being, I know what I know and I know what I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm a very humble, a very generous person, and sometimes too generous for my own good. Matt Murphy out here, who's president of our company. And when I gave him the job last year, I'll never forget, he and I met together in Hagerstown, which is about halfway between here and my home. And the first thing he said to me, he said, "You know the difference between you and me?" He said, "I'm not as big a wimp as you are." and he's not. And he's the perfect, example of what we need to lead our company. I mean, I said to myself one day, Matt's a better leader than I am. He's a better consultant than I am. And I'm a better speaker than he is. But speaking is such a small part of this business that to run the company, if that's what your major skill is idiotic. So, I mean, I still am, CEO, and I still own the company, but I'm smart enough to know that I'm not the guy to run the company. He is. And he's been president since March, and it's unbelievable what he's done. I told my wife today on the phone coming down here, I said, Matt is the greatest thing to ever happen to Delta Point. She said, "No, he's not." I said, "Why do you say that?" She said, "Because you are. Because without you, there ain't no Delta Point."
And you attracted him in your life.
And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, all right, I understand that." I said, "Then let me just rephrase that. He's the greatest thing to ever happen to Delta Point other than me." But I said, "But he's a way better manager than I am. He's a way better leader than I am. He's a way better thinker than I am." When I hired Matt, I thought of all the arguments he and I have had, which is probably 100. and I don't mean arguments, but I mean disagreements about, how to do something. And I remember saying to myself, he's won 99% of those. Well, I mean, how smart do you have to be to realize that guy has a perspective on things that you don't have? And so I'm a big believer that, that you ought to have your own inventory of what you're good at, and you ought to really try and do what you're good at, and the things that you're not good at, you need to hire people that are good at it. I mean, we just hired last year, or year before last, a head of our operations, and she has made such an unbelievable impact on our business.
Was that Fran that I met?
Wonderful. I told Fran when she and I were out in Denver last week, I said, I have to tell you, if I had to describe you in one word, I would say you're indispensable. And I said, and I tell you, if this company ever goes out of business, the last 3 people that'll be here will be me, you, and Matt.
Wow.
Now, I don't expect this company's ever going out of business because we've been in business now for, this coming up will be our 18th year. And most companies don't make it past 5 years or 10 years. And we're stronger and better than we've ever been,
Being that we're doing, the amount of knowledge that has come out of your brain, by the way, I can usually keep up, but there's a professor I follow on YouTube named Robert Sapolsky, who just is so freaking smart and says so much value so rapidly. It's one of the most engaging things for me to watch because I learned so much. Today made me feel that way. So I want to tell you,
well, send me an email. Send me an email with his name because I loved it. I'd love to watch him.
Like attracts like. So I'm just like, thank you again. And I want to say, being that we're doing the videos together and, the world is changing, you're saying things like, I haven't heard that actually, but I should know that. 2025, 75% of the workplace will be millennial. What's your view on social media? What's your view on putting yourself out there in that regard? Is that something that you're doing? I've seen you on YouTube. I watched a bunch of your videos. Is it something that you're continually doing?
Yeah, if you're not on social media, you're in trouble. The other problem with social media is that, this is one of the things I teach my athletes, everything matters. I said, that tattoo that says, I love you, Janine, is great until you marry Louise. Now what the hell are you going to do? So, put mom on there or something. Don't be stupid. And social media is the same thing. Whatever you put on social media could live forever. So I think you got to be really mindful of it. And I think you also have to understand how social media is changing. Facebook used to be just this sort of non-intrusive way for you to share your birthdays and pictures of your family with friends, and now it's a gigantic marketing tool. Google, probably the most powerful company in the world, also owns YouTube. They're the 2 biggest search engines in America. Yeah. And so really understanding, one of the things I tell our people is that if you don't understand how these social media platforms work and where they're going, then you're going to be a dinosaur in 5 years.
So you openly admit that and believe that?
Absolutely openly admit it. Now, I also realized last year that I did not know enough about social media marketing. And so I went and took 3 or 4 courses online, paid probably $15,000 to try and learn more about it. And then I hired actually, a marketing expert for online to actually help me with my Jerry Acuff VT. But the other thing is it's becoming, because of its capability and its what I call its exponential potential, and it is exponential. Everybody's doing it, which makes it even more difficult to compete. So this is why you have to have something that really differentiates you.
Some serious level of truth.
But I will tell you that virtual training, and I do believe this, virtual training is probably the greatest thing to happen to training in the last 500 years. I mean, understand, I'm rated one of the top 15 sales experts in the world. I think I'm 13 this year.
I want to say number 5.
Well, I was number 5 last year, but that was this year I fell down to 13 because my ex-wife voted. And
you keep that flip?
Yeah. So you can keep that one.
Love truth.
Yeah. But I mean, I was in an article one time said I was one of the 50 greatest salespeople of all time.
I believe that.
And I said, I know 50 people better than me, so I don't believe that. I put it on my website because it looks good. But the reality is there are lots of people that know an awful lot about selling. But the truth is that if you don't embrace virtual training, then you will be a dinosaur. Because this way you can have me and Kevin Elko in your car. I had a conversation the other night with a district manager, a regional manager for a big pharmaceutical company, and she's a very dear friend of mine who I've just known for years. And I said something to her about, do you have my virtual training? And she said, no, I don't have your virtual training. And I've always teased her about, I need to spend more time with you, and, because she's wanting me to coach her and stuff. And I said, now just think of it. We essentially live together. You take my virtual training, I'm in your living room every night. And so, but the truth is, but the other thing that I would say about virtual training, and I do believe this, and I think this would be a part of the way I market it, if you're not serious about using it, don't buy it. I mean, my stuff is $500, $600, $700, $800, which is not a gigantic investment if you want to be great.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to be great, then you're going to buy it and you ain't going to ever open it up and look at it. I tell people I give away, and I'll do it still, I give away my goal setting system, which is 22 minutes long. Now, I told you I read that book, Psycho-Cybernetics,
yes.
right?
79
times.
Okay.
And so, but the point is, you don't need to read that book if you take my goal setting, but you have to watch it 5 times. And I tell people, it's not going to change your life unless you watch it 5 times. So I have a guy call me one time who was in an audience for one of my clients, and he calls me and he says, I'm a PharmD, and I've been in sales for 17 years, but I've always wanted to be in the medical department. I've interviewed 10 times for jobs in the medical department, hadn't got any of them. He said, and it occurred to me that maybe you could give me something to say that would get me an interview or would actually get me the job. And I said, honestly, I think you're starting at the wrong place. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, you need to take my goal setting system and I want you to watch it 5 times and then call me and tell me you still want to be in medical affairs. Because I'm not sure that this is, because one of the keys to being great at goal setting is to have exquisite clarity about what you want. And I'm not sure your clarity is exquisite just from listening to you talk about how much you like sales and how much you think you like this. I'm not sure that you're exquisitely clear. So he calls me after 3 weeks and he said, okay, I've only watched it 3 times, but it's changed my life.
Wow.
After 5 times, he calls me and he says, I have 2 interviews for jobs in the medical affairs department. No, 3 interviews, and one of them is the perfect job for me, location and everything. He called me the next week, he got the perfect job.
And that's like an hour and a half ish of investment of his time.
It's 5 times 22 minutes.
110 minutes.
110 minutes. It's less than 2 hours.
And he didn't have to.
And I tell people, watch it once a day or once every other day, and really, really think about it because it's powerful, powerful stuff. See, the other thing is that most of us let other people talk us out of our greatness, and the person who's most likely to talk you out of your greatness is you. And I'll give you an example. My dad, when he turned 79, he wound up dying of Alzheimer's at 83, and we saw him starting to, slide back a little bit. So I had him come to Scottsdale, and we have a really nice home in Scottsdale on 3 acres, 5,100 square foot house, nice pool, fountain. It's been in magazines and stuff. And so I have them picked up with my brothers and sisters. So I paid for all of them to come out, right? And so we're in 2 town cars going to my house. And the woman who drives me is fairly large, and she always wore a black suit. Her name is Marla.
Okay.
She always took me back and forth to the airport because if you get in at 2 o'clock in the morning, the last thing I want to do is drive, right? So she takes me out to my house, takes my brothers and sisters out to my house. We have a whole weekend together. We have a great time. I take them back on Sunday. Marla drives them back on Sunday, and I forget where I was flying, but I was going somewhere else on Sunday. They were all going back to Memphis.
Yeah.
On Monday, my father, now you understand, my father quit school in the 10th grade. And he was a serial entrepreneur, but he could never keep any money. So he'd make a lot of money and then he'd lose it. And part of it's because he kept getting, married. But anyway, so I always say, he's a great guy, but was lousy at picking women. On the other hand, my wife I'd be nothing without my wife. I mean, my wife is, when I started this company, we had a 1-year-old, and she's doing proposals and PowerPoint presentations at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm out doing the customer-facing stuff, and she's doing all the back-end stuff and raising a 1-year-old. So I can't tell you how much she's meant to our business and still does. But my brother is, calls me on Monday night, and he said, "Hey, you're not going to believe this." He said, "Dad called it." We call him Big A. Big A called today, and he told me, he said, "You got to get over here." And so my brother, his name is Jude, said, "Why?" And he said, "I got to talk to you about your older brother." So Jude said, "Well, what's wrong with Jerry?" He said, "Just get over here. I got to talk to you about him." So my old man, Jude, goes over there, and my old man says, "Let me ask you a question. You think Jerry's doing something illegal?" And Jude said, "What the hell are you talking about? Illegal?" He said, "Well, he got that big old woman driving him around. Looks like she's in the mafia. He's got that big old fancy house." And he said, "You sure he ain't doing something illegal?" But you see, his paradigm is that I could never succeed that way. If I thought the way he thought, I would never have been the success I've been. And so, I've always surrounded myself, luckily, with people like Don Cutcliffe, the guy who, changed my life. I'll tell you a funny story about him. 2 years ago, I went down and had, he's 83 now. I went down and had dinner with him, and I was just down there anyway. Yeah. And so I called him before, tell him I'm coming, and say, "Hey, can I take you and Mary Ann to dinner?" His wife's name is Mary Ann, too. And he said, "Yeah, that'd be great." But then he says to me over the phone, I remember I was riding up the Route 81 just about the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and he says, "I got a bone to pick with you." And I said, "What is it?" He says, you've written this blog and stuff about my influence on you. And he said, "I just don't see, I see our relationship differently." And I said, "Okay, well, we can argue about it over dinner." So we go to dinner. And now this guy's 83, and he's in good shape. And he hasn't lost nothing up here. And neither has his wife. I mean, they're just fabulous. And so we go to dinner, and I said, "Okay, let's get the beef out of the way. I'm buying dinner, but let's get the beef out of the way." He said, "Well, I just don't remember our relationship like you do." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Jerry, I learned more from you than you learned from me." I said, "Don," I said, "I'm not denying that you learned stuff from me, just like I learned stuff from you." I said, "But I didn't change your life. You changed mine."
Wow.
And that's the difference, you see. You changed my life. I didn't change your life. I may have been an important part of your life, but I didn't change your life. You changed my life. I wouldn't be sitting here today. I wouldn't be everything I've accomplished, whether it's my company, whether it's all these awards you see out here, or whether it's these top, 15 sales experts in the world. None of that happens if he ain't done what he did for me. So the difference between you and me is not how much we learn from each other, but that you changed my life. I didn't change yours. He said, "Okay, I see it now." But I said, "But here's the point. The fact that you would even say that to me, you know what it says to me? You were just being you. To you, telling me that wasn't a big deal, because it's just what you believe."
So how many people has he changed?
How many people has he changed?
And I'll say to you, how many people that I believe, I know you've probably changed so many lives. At the end of the day, what does someone say about Jerry Acuff?
He was a good guy. My wife says, "You're too nice." And I said, "Put that on my tombstone." He's too nice.
So I got to ask this, because you seem open-minded and innovative and thinking of the future. And as sharp as that guy is, we haven't skipped a beat here, Jerry. Like, I've interviewed 98 people this year for my personal development, and this is probably the most engaging conversation I've had. Like, I feel like I need water to keep up. So, and I work really hard on that.
It's better than liquor.
Yeah. So, what's the next 30 years, 40 years? Are you a bit of a futurist? Do you think about these things? Because they're saying.
I'd like to, I always compare myself to Warren Buffett.
Okay.
And so I want to be Warren Buffett. Not in terms of the money, because I'll never have that kind of money, But also, at my age, I'll be 70 in April. I work 75, 80 hours a week, and I sleep 4 or 5 hours a night, and I love my job. I love my family. I've got, I try and spend a lot of quality time with and I have a wonderful wife who's unbelievably supportive of whatever I do. And is not bothered by me, being away, and, would like to have me at home. But I mean, also, during the course of the year, I'll probably take 2 months off, and it won't be 2 months at one time, but I mean, it'll be stretches of 2 or 3 weeks where I'm not doing anything. I mean, I might be making a call or something. But I always see myself as Warren Buffett, stay active, continue to learn, because the one thing that I'm a huge believer in is the more I learn there is to learn. And so I want to continue to learn. I was an English major in college.
Yeah.
And, one of my favorite, poems was by Christopher Marlowe, who wrote Faustus. And then Wolfgang von Goethe wrote the play Faust. But they both say the same thing, and that is, if you ever get to a moment in your life where you say about this moment, thou art so fair, linger a while. You basically have begun the dying process.
Wow.
And so don't ever get satisfied or happy with where you are. Now, I'm thrilled with my business. I'm thrilled with my family. I'm thrilled with what I have. I'll never have enough money to do. There's only one thing that I would like to do in life that I can't do, and I'll never be able to do it, so I don't care about it. And so I don't spend any time thinking about it because it's the only thing that I know I'll never accomplish. And so,
which is
on a sports team, and to that you need several $1 billion, and I'm never going to have that. But I mean, I'm financially, we're not having any telethon. Right. We're not having any telethons for Jerry, and so I'd like to see. I tell my children that for you to earn my inheritance, whatever it is, three things have to be true. You have to be generous, you have to be humble, and you have to prove to me that you're responsible and don't need my money. If you prove those three things to me, I'll leave it to you. If not, I'll leave it all to charity.
Wow.
Now, my daughter's already proved those three things. She's 43. She's generous, she's humble, and she's responsible for herself. Makes, great living, super duper at what she does. My 18-year-old is still a work in progress, but he knows that that's the criteria.
Does he have an idea of what he wants to do with his life yet?
No, he wants to be in business. He's sold on the fact that he's going to be a businessman, and he's very innovative. He's very creative. He's got a lot of common sense.
Which isn't so common anymore.
No, it isn't so common. He's got a black belt in karate. He's 5'6", 135 pounds.
Don't mess with him.
And I told him, I said, look, I'll pay for that karate, but don't ever use that crap on me. Because if you do, then you owe me $5,000. So he's, but both of my children have been, huge blessing in my life, and Laura when I was a younger man, and probably not nearly as good a father as I am today, because I was also climbing the ladder. And I don't think I was a bad father, but I just think that the older you get, the more mature you get, the probably
that was about when you started at the first pharmaceutical company, right? When you had her, raising her.
Yeah. So but also my ex-wife was great. There were things about our relationship that weren't great, but as a mother and as a supporter of my career, she was A+. So I've just been blessed, and I count my blessings every day.
My final question to you.
Sure.
You've had a very extraordinary life, in my opinion. Went to college, climbed the corporate ladder, had business, entrepreneurial successes and setbacks, and it come to the point where it seems like you're working harder than I do, and I'm what's going on here, and you're still going to be doing that for a long time, I think. If you were to have a conversation with yourself a week before you started that first pharmaceutical company, knowing everything that you know today, right, all the mentors that taught you certain things, you're having a conversation, you got a minute. What do you have in that conversation with yourself a week before you started that first pharmaceutical job?
Never forget that if you give, you get.
This was a blessing.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Can't wait to see you.
Giving doesn't cost, it pays. Giving doesn't cost, it pays. And whether you're giving of your time, whether you're giving of your mentorship, whether you're giving of your money, it doesn't cost, it pays. I go back and think of when I started donating the scholarship at VMI, I would never have met Buzz Williams. I'd never met Herb Sendek. I'd never met Duker Balcom. I'd have never been, I'm about to be the president of the alumni of the, not the Alumni Association, but of the Athletic Foundation at my college. I'm on the board of the Alumni Agencies Board, which manages all of the alumni agencies. I would never have gotten to know General P., who is a wonderful man. None of that happens to me if I don't give money and give my time. And so, when I speak, I tell people, giving doesn't cost; it pays. And so, I never want to forget that, that giving is probably the most important thing you can do.
I'm going to quote you on that, Facebook. Giving doesn't cost, it pays.
And it does. So
I appreciate you
been great.
giving today.